everybody, how are we doing today? I wanted to talk just a little bit about, or share some of my thoughts, I guess we're not actually going to talk, about what's going on in Russia with Putin. Because I think it's something that none of us are really focusing on. We're spending way too much time worrying about a single can of Bud Light or crap that's going on in Florida or Texas or California, and not focusing enough on what is beginning to happen over in Russia, and the fact that those cats have damn near 6,000 nuclear warheads of various sizes and shape. And if Putin loses power, who's taking over and what could happen? And I think we need to look back through Russia's history, however brief. I'm not a history professor. I just play one on YouTube. But however brief at least a brief sort of history, because I think it's important. Now, Russia by landmass is actually the largest country in the world, by a lot. From an economic standpoint, their GDP, they're about 8th and falling. And much of their natural resources are found in the west portion of the country, near Finland, Poland, Ukraine, Georgia, Latvia, etc. As a matter of fact, here, just take a quick look at this map. It'll kind of give you an idea and help you understand, I think, why Putin is doing what Putin is doing. But here, take a look. Right. So this is where I think this problem with Putin comes, is could this invasion of Ukraine that he started last year sort of mark his end? And is he missing, or is he going to repeat, is he missing the lessons learned in history, and is he going to make the same mistakes that his predecessors have made previously? Now, in order to sort of understand that, we got to go way back to like the mid 1100s. And again, I'm not a history professor. We're going to go through this kind of quick because I know your attention span can't be more than 3 or 4 minutes. But bear with me. I think I have a point, and it's kind of interesting. But back in the mid 1100s, there was a small empire of Moscow. And Moscow is named after the Moskova River, I believe, that's near the city/town. Now, in about 1156, the Mongols invade, and of course, they do what Mongols do, which is burn everything down, rape and pillage, and they begin taking the natural resources of the area and using the people that they didn't kill. They enslave them, and this becomes a problem for a long, long time. Now, one of the things that the folks of Moscow learned, it's a very difficult region to sort of protect at that time because there's no natural mountains, there's no oceans or large rivers to sort of isolate and protect them. Now, sometime later, Ivan the Great comes along and he frees the Russian people from Mongol rule in late 1400s. So, the Mongols were around for quite a long time. Now, Ivan, learning from his ancestors, begins to expand the Moscow Empire, or what will eventually be known as the Russian Empire, to sort of create a buffer between the great community of Moscow and everybody else. And one of the things that he does is he rebuilds the Kremlin in Moscow that the Mongols had burnt to the ground. Now, Ivan the Great, he dies in like 1505, and shortly thereafter, Ivan the Terrible takes over, and now he continues that expansion of Russia, but he goes east and heads into parts of Siberia and tries to pull a significant portion of that under Moscow's control. And Ivan the Terrible names himself the first Tsar of Russia. Now, I know what you're asking. Well, why do they call him Ivan the Terrible? We'll look it up, crack a book. I don't have time to go down that path. But Ivan the Terrible. And they basically expand their empire dramatically in those years. Now, Ivan the Terrible, he dies in like 1584. And shortly thereafter, Moscow falls into, the Moscow area falls into a civil war. Poland actually invades. And they sort of run things for a couple of years, and eventually Moscow gains control of their community and stuff again in about 1613, and this cat named Mikhail Romanov takes over. Now, he is the first czar, first czar of the Romanov dynasty, and that dynasty lasts, I don't know, like 300 years. Now, he finishes the conquest of Siberia. He actually gets as far as Alaska and I believe the Aleutian Islands during his reign. Like I said, the Romanov dynasty lasts about 300 years. Now, there's a few hiccups along the way. In the late 1600s, the Cossacks cause him some trouble. In 1721, Peter the Great comes along. In 1762, I think Catherine the Great, she basically takes over the throne, if you will, from Peter III. And Catherine, I believe, is a Austrian or a German gal that rules Russia. And it becomes a time of great enlightenment for Russia in the 1700s. In 1861, Alexander II, again, this is all under the Romanov dynasty. And one of the things that old Alex does is he abolishes serfdom, which is essentially slavery, right? Ahead of us, by the way. But anyway, now, during, I just rattled off some points in history that need to be investigated, but all along through there are several wars that Russia has amongst itself. The 1905 Russian Revolution, the Crimean War, the Russo-Japanese War, and you know they just take a beating continually. And actually, in 1905, that Russian Revolution, Nicholas II actually, I think, sort of ends that revolution by making huge promises about letting people be more free, and he creates, I think they're called Dumas, which are essentially sort of this House of Representatives. So people actually may have some say-so in what goes on in the politics. Now, about 1917, there's another revolution that's known as the Red October. That was a big one, and Nicholas is tossed, and that gives rise to the Bolsheviks, which we all know the Bolsheviks were run by Lenin, and that the Dumas are no more. Those House of Representatives sort of end, and that sort of brings us into World War I. Now, Russia was in no shape to be in World War I after the revolutions and all those many wars, which, one, sapped their natural resources, killed tons of their people, just tons and tons of their people. But they entered the war no matter what. And you have to remember, at that time, the Russian Empire is made up of all kinds of fiefdoms and I don't want to say villages, but areas or countries, if you will, that have different ideologies, different practices. I think even by today's standards, only 30% of Russia are actually Russians or identify as Russians. They are the Soviet Georgia. They don't consider themselves Russians. They consider themselves, Georgians. There's many providences. That's the word I was looking for. That make up this vast empire, if you will. That'll sort of be important in a moment. So World War I breaks out and comes to an end. It was very, very hard on Russia. They lost some territories. They lost Poland. In 1918, they fought a war with Poland. They got their ass handed to them. Poland's independent. Finland, they fight a year or two war with Finland, and Finland becomes independent. So does Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. And please note, all of those are countries in the West, where all the natural resources are. The only natural resource Siberia has is snow, and eventually, I believe, oil, but snow for the most part. And even Romania, through the Bucharest Treaty, is basically freed. So after all of their civil conflicts, the Great War weakens them, tremendously, and they just can't they just can't get it together. They've got mass starvation because the war machine takes a lot to keep going, and it's at the sacrifice of their people. So there's not a lot of food, which is important. There's not a lot of natural resources because they just lost a lot of places that had it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, so somewhere in the 20s, Stalin takes over. And what he wants to do is take basically Russia, or what's then going to start to be known as the Soviet Union, these 15 or 16 provinces, if you will. He's going to take them from farming into industrialization, no matter the cost. And one of the biggest costs it's called, I believe, forced collectionalism, where people are forced to move and you're going to shut your farm down and you're going to go work at this farm. You're not going to work at that plant. You're going to go work over here. And if you don't, they'll just kill you, which doesn't sit well with the citizens. But it does what he needs to do. He transitions them from a farming community to a highly industrialized country. And even though World War I was hard on him, that sort of turns things around. Now, Stalin, a little time passes, World War II is coming up. Well, Stalin makes a deal with Hitler to basically expand and divide Europe in like 1939. As a matter of fact, Poland, Russia invades East Poland at the same time Germany invades West Poland, and I think Stalin took parts of Romania, Latvia, and some other areas. Again, to get natural resources, but his plan sort of gets into motion. You're starting to see a pattern of, we start with Little Moscow, the Mongols invade, then we start to expand out to Finland and Poland and such, and then we go up through Siberia, and then we sort of lose this. For some reason, no one wants Siberia. And in 1865, as many as you know, it was called Stuart's Folly. Look it up. But basically, the United States purchased Alaska and the Aleutian Islands from Russia in 1865 or 1864, I forget. But right around there, we actually purchased. So even that shrank a little bit. So their empire just seems to be like one of those squeeze boxes. It contracts and grows, contracts and grows. Well, anyway, Hitler sees an opportunity to blow off Stalin, and he invades the Soviet Union in 1941 under, I think it was called the Barbarossa plan or the Barbarossa attack. Well, so this now forces Stalin, he doesn't have a choice. He has to side with the Allies to fight the Germans and the Italians. Well, as you all know, the war basically ends, and Russia, got basically East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Prussia, all part of the Warsaw Pact, and the West, the Allies, we kept West Germany, and we gave back, obviously, France and some other countries. And in 1949, the Soviet Union exploded their first atomic weapon, 4 years behind us. But that basically started the Cold War, and the Iron Curtain went up across Europe and lasted for a very, very long time. Now, part of the problem that Russia had is under Stalin and other leaders as we move forward, it's sort of a modified socialist plan, communist sort of plan where it's all central planning. And the problem with that is it doesn't allow you there's no free market, you can't be diversified. And if the government tells you as a company what to make and how many widgets you're supposed to make a day, you just make the widget, and you don't try to make a better widget, et cetera, et cetera. And they never really seem to get out of their own way. And of course, all the sanctions that the West puts on the Soviet Union, does not help. But they continue to build their military might, making bombs and tanks, et cetera, et cetera. Then in the late 70s, right around 1980, this cat, Mikhail Gorbachev, he sort of takes over. And during this time, you have to keep in mind, the Russian people, we continue to have that separation, much like this country, The poor get poorer, and the smaller rich seem to continue to get richer. But Gorbachev comes in and he says, you know what? We've got to adopt some things. We've got to get a free market. We've got to create a stock market. We've got to start the Dumas again, which Stalin immediately, and so did Nicholas II, really. Whenever they didn't agree with him, he'd just kill them or shut it off. But that idea of a House of Representatives, some free market, some privatization of some things to try to spur the economy in a positive way. Well, I think one of the wall come down, I think 89, 90, I forget now, but Gorbachev was successful in some things, but his biggest stumbling block was in 1979, the war in Afghanistan. He goes in and we sort of fight a proxy war with Russia through Afghanistan because Russia wanted to make sure that Afghanistan never joined NATO. They were supposedly a communist country. And ended up fighting those clowns for 20 years until they left, and then we took over and we spent 20 years fighting the Afghans. And they had terrible loss of life, and they thought they'd be able to take over that country and handle it swiftly. They didn't. And the economic catastrophe that was that, their people just continued to suffer, just continued to suffer. And it never really worked. And his great plan sort of worked, but it never really took off, again, because the country, it's hardly a country. At least in the United States, push comes to shove, we're all still the United States. We might say this is the South, this is the Northeast, there's the Yankees, there's the Southerners, there's the Midwest, and then there's us assholes out here in California. But when push comes to shove, we're all Americans. And I don't think that happens in Russia. You're from Latvia, you're from Romania, you might be under some sort of territorial rule, but at the end of the day, you are a Georgian, not a Russian. But anyway, none of this is really working, and on December 25th, 1991, Gorbachev resigns, and the last day, December the 31st, 1991, the USSR is no more. And now there's 15 independent provinces or states, if you will, that are no longer under any kind of Russian control. And some of those 15 are like Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Georgia, Estonia, and a number of others. They're all sort of independent. Now in 1999, Boris Yeltsin tries to keep control of some things and try to continue Gorbachev's ideas, but it doesn't really work. And in 1999, that's when Putin takes over. And I believe his goal has been to reassemble that Soviet Union, those 15 provinces. He even has said that he called the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. Now, take a look at a couple of these maps. I'm going to show you a map of 1914, and then sort of a map of today, what Putin's looking for. And I believe that's sort of his plan, and it's always that expansion west to get those natural resources. And again, I only bring all this up because everything that's been going on, you figure in 2014, he took Crimea back from Ukraine. He took it from Ukraine and took it back. And then last year he invaded Ukraine, and that war continues. And I think we're not paying attention, or maybe we are, but we need to be paying attention to what's going over there, because if somebody, just recently there was that little coup, and then Putin grabbed that cat's family, and I'm going to kill all your grandkids and blah, blah, blah. But where there's one coup, there's more coming. And there's an awful lot of rich oligarchs, and there's an awful lot of people that would love to get their hands on a nuclear weapon that maybe should not have. They're not smart enough to refine the uranium to make the bomb, or the dough, et cetera, et cetera. But I have a concern that on the black market, if Putin goes away, and if us, China, in Europe aren't paying attention and making sure steps are taken to, bad things could happen. But anyway, just talking out loud, I think that stuff's super interesting. As we close, just take a look at a couple of these maps. You know what? Here, take a look at these maps right now. Do you kind of see what I mean? I mean, again, I'm not a historian, I'm not a professor, but I think some of this is interesting. I hope you got a kick out of it, and please look some of it up. I glossed over hundreds and hundreds of years of Russian history, and it's quite fascinating. A lot of shit went on. You could spend a ton of time just talking about the Bolsheviks, Lenin, and the rise of communism, the manifesto, and their fascist socialism as opposed to a democratic socialism, and how all that works, and then are they a real enemy, a perceived enemy? But I'm going to go down a rat hole now. But anyway, do your own investigating, look some stuff up. I hope this sort of spurred your learning juices, and you'll go look into this some more. And if not, well, you learned a couple things anyway. You'll drink it away and forget. But in this world, when you can be anything you want, you be kind, you be humble, you be forgiving, and we'll see you next time. Bye.